Martin Benson from Martin Benson Speaks, Cod Hill Press. About sound. I think you have to hear tones as no one else hears them. But to hear that sound, there's a definite sound there, and until you hear, you don't know if you're coming or going, or if what you're trying to do is coming or going. It's all mixed up and it's all scattered. There won't be any sense until you hear that sound. If you can hear that sound, no matter what happens, it'll be right. Otherwise, you're figuring out all the bad things, good things. But that sound is the whole picture. That's the whole expression. And that's the way I'm placing my life. I want to hear that sound, and I'm making every effort under the sun. It's not like hearing a bell or anything. But I want to hear that whole place, that ice house, ring as it could, the only place on the whole plantation that could ring, like the Aeolian harp. If there's enough usage and tone coming out of everything, every person and everything. If it's used, suddenly you'll hear the sound of that piece, and it will be a sound, an understanding, a possibility that could come out of that kind of thing. I had it out with Madame de Salzmann last summer. I went down and we sat talking. She's very much interested in what I'm doing, with these tones and sounds and expressions, and that where there's movement there has to be a sound. And I said, in everything it doesn't have to be the movements, but in the movements of the people you're close to and working with, if the movements were taught, not that they had to be doing it perfectly, but to create an atmosphere of contact with their neighbours all around, to try to make contact with their people instead of attempting to do the movements correctly and everybody is out of their existence. Then there is a definite sound. If a whole group can make contact, there's a definite sound. She said, I know exactly what you mean. We started to do the movements to that picture, and then I stopped after a week and I said, we're not getting any place. We're not doing anything, and I think we won't do it anymore. And then they said, let's have a meeting. And they sat up all night and talked it all over. The next day they came in, and they were electrified. They hadn't slept, and I heard the sound. There was a definite sound. And she said, then I knew that we could go ahead and make the film. I said, then you know what I'm attempting. And she said, oh, absolutely. What have you got to express? That's what Casals said in every lesson. I saw him on the television. Try to put something of your own into it. Don't just read the notes, but put something of you into the expression. And that's what I always tell you about Paderewski. He made mistakes on purpose. The Lanier family over in Greenwich had a pianola, and someone who read the whole score as if it was playing said, I counted 5 mistakes. This was reported to Paderewski, and he said, you have to put something of yourself into the record. It wouldn't be right to play a perfect piece. You understand? I think that is the great lesson. What is your expression? It can't just be read as notes or whatever. That's why I'm fooling around with tones. I think you have to hear tones as no one else hears them. Not crazy. I mean, you can hear various things no matter how deaf you are. You have to see also. But for people to come with scientific data on tone, that is the least I'm interested in. I don't want to get involved with that. I don't even want to think about it because I don't want to look for that. I want to have access to that, but I don't want to look at it. A Zen piece on tone was one of the best things I've read. The different signals with tone. They all know the pitch of the different bells, the timbre of everything that is being banged. Well, that is something. Then, of course, the great thing that can happen in the course of time, as the saying was years ago, try to hear your own echo. Not your own voice, but your own echo. When did you first get interested in sound? All my life. You see, I could sing. I sang all the time. That was the good thing. When I was a young boy, I sang. For my existence. Thank God Carnegie Hall existed. Carnegie Hall was my musical education. After a while, it didn't matter what they played. That was the thing. And when I heard my first chorus, I thought it was out of this world. It was something about St. Francis. Who wrote it, or what it was, I don't know, but it was wonderful for me. Then when I heard Bach's music and horns for the first time, I heard it again in Notre Dame Cathedral. We were listening to the B minor Mass, and during the intermission they did Bach with horns, long horns, all sizes, in the choir loft over the entrance. It was out of this world, and it is made for a big space like Notre Dame. There were about 6,500 people all jammed in, and once you got in, you never got out, not even for intermission. They played this from behind you. You wouldn't think you'd be interested in anything so loud and blaring, but it was beautiful. The whole B minor Mass was sung by the choir of Saint Eustache. Music is civilized civilization. I went through this whole thing because I don't know any better. That was the thing to do. So I heard every kind of artist and music, every kind of sound, until I graduated from that. And you wouldn't think you'd graduate. I have graduated. There are people who go crazy because they hear sounds. Maybe people think you're crazy if you hear sounds, but you don't hear sounds psychologically. You actually hear things. That's one of my curious idiosyncrasies, how a movement without sound affects me. Ballet affected me, and I never knew why, until I'm coming closer to why. If ballet or a great movement of humans was done objectively, as we're attempting to do in the movements, as objectively as possible, perhaps I would have heard a sound. But seeing as how there wasn't any sound, I used to become ill, physically ill. All this movement and nothing. It was just movement. And there has to be movement, but the sound has to be there too. And I could never understand why I was affected. You know, we go through the horror of our accidental birth and existence, because everyone is born by accident. There's no doubt about it. There's hardly any person born by design. But here we are believing in our little miracle thing, that this is the right thing for us, that this is the truth. Many discouragements come. Many things happen in the course of a lifetime, but this is our belief, without looking toward a larger sphere of existence that encompasses this whole universe, because you could be part of that. Not to make judgment, but here it is. And it is not to say I accept this way, but here it is. And in a curious way, while you're living tissue, do something about that existence. Just do something about that existence while you're alive. You know, the greatest miracle I can find in my depth is that we can see. We're able to see and observe. How in the hell does that happen? Of course, all the senses are a miracle, and of course I'm working on sound now. What is sound? But to be able to see is a very strange thing. I don't know if you've ever thought about such things. The 5 senses exist, but according to the old man, there were 7 senses and we've lost 2. H.G. Wells wrote about another world where people were blind, but they had developed another sense. I feel very deeply that was the sense of perception most of mankind had at one time, and now it's lost. Now there are people who are born with a strong sense of perception, greater than other people. It's not that these people are better, but they happen to be born with a greater sense of perception. These people are not great, and that's the curious thing, the normality of them. Even with greater insight, with greater keenness. It's not that these people are greater than others, just normal. God knows what the other senses were, but I suspect that perception was one of them. If a man forgets